Hello there. Today, I'd like to take you on a journey into a classic Hollywood musical, Easter Parade. This film, which stars Judy Garland and Fred Astaire, was made during the golden era of Hollywood musicals at the end of the 1940s, and it's a wonderful Technicolor celebration of music and dance. I watch it every year at Easter, and it's become such a beloved part of my Easter celebrations that I thought it would be rather nice to share that with you and explore some of the reasons why this film is such a great classic and why it's still loved by fans of Hollywood musicals the world over. As usual, there will be a few images to accompany our talk on the video, but there's no need for you to look at them if you don't want to. If you prefer, you can just close your eyes, relax, and let my voice guide you. So, welcome to the world of Easter Parade. This film was made in 1948 by MGM, the studio that was responsible for the golden age of Hollywood musicals in the years after World War II. It was produced by Arthur Freed, who was the man largely responsible for this golden era, and whose first producer credit had been on The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland. He'd already made several musicals by 1948, and now he was looking for another vehicle for Judy, who by this time was one of MGM's leading stars. But the idea for the film actually came from the songwriter, Irving Berlin, who was a huge songwriting star by the late 1940s, after such hits as Blue Skies, Puttin' on the Ritz, Top Hat, and, most famously of all, White Christmas. Berlin had originally written the song Easter Parade in 1933, and it had featured in the 1933 musical As Thousands Cheer, but now he wanted to use it as the lead song in a whole new Easter-themed musical. And he originally took the idea to 20th Century Fox. Fox decided they didn't want to pay him as much money as Berlin wanted for the deal, but when Arthur Freed found out that Berlin had pitched the idea, he greeted it with enthusiasm, and the film went into production with a combination of songs that Berlin had already written in years past, and a few new songs that he wrote especially for the picture. The song Easter Parade itself had been inspired by the actual Easter Parade that took place, and still takes place, every Easter Sunday on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Nobody knows quite when this tradition started, but it seemed to grow up sometime between the 1870s and the 1880s, and it involved people from all walks of life putting on their most marvellous hats and parading up and down Fifth Avenue in all their Easter finery. By the early 20th century, the parade was an established part of New York Easter traditions, and so Arthur Freed decided to set the film in 1912 and make the musical a period piece. To create the movie, he assembled a crack team around him, including Roger Edens, an extremely talented composer who helped to arrange a lot of the Irving Berlin songs for the musical's score. For directing duties, he was originally planning to use the celebrated director Vincent Minnelli, who was married to Judy Garland at the time. However, the husband and wife duo had just finished filming The Pirate, which was also a musical, and which had been played with on-set difficulties due to Judy's health. There had been many tensions on set, and Judy Garland was already beginning to suffer from the terrible depression and mental illness that would plague her for the rest of her life. After filming The Pirate, she'd actually attempted suicide and gone to make a recovery in a sanatorium, and her therapist suggested to her that it might not be a good idea for her to work with her husband again so soon after finishing The Pirate. So Arthur Freed called in the director Charles Waters, who had originally begun his career as an actor and a dancer, and who had worked with Judy Garland before as a choreographer. He wasn't the only member of the team who had worked with Judy Garland before, because her original co-star for the project was due to be Gene Kelly, with whom she'd already made many musicals. Kelly was signed up for the picture, and he and Robert Alton had already started to choreograph the musical numbers. But disaster struck when, during a game of volleyball, Kelly broke his ankle and had to pull out of the project. He suggested to Arthur Freed that the best person to take over his role would be Fred Astaire, the legendary musical star and tap dancer. But Fred Astaire had retired 2 years earlier, and it wasn't known if he was still interested in making musicals. However, Astaire came out of retirement very gladly in order to co-star with Judy Garland, whom he'd wanted to work with for some time. To Judy Garland, he was a legend, and she was so shy about meeting him that, on their first day on set, she had to get the scriptwriter Sidney Sheldon to introduce them formally before she would dare speak to him. However, after this initial shyness, the pair of them got on very well indeed, and Fred Astaire described Judy Garland as an amazing girl. She could do things, anything, without rehearsing, and come off perfectly. She could learn faster, do everything better than most people. It was one of the greatest thrills to work with her. This lovely quotation is actually quite ironic within the context of the film, because in it, Judy Garland's character, Hannah Brown, isn't a fast learner at all. She's plucked from obscurity by Fred Astaire's character, Don Hughes, who is a very famous and successful but quite arrogant ballroom dancer. He's been dancing with his partner Nadine, and the pair of them are big, big stars. However, after Nadine decides she wants to go it alone, and breaks Don's heart in the process, he goes to a bar to drown his sorrows and, in a slightly inebriated state, picks out Judy Garland's character from the rather shambolic chorus line that's working in the bar. He tells her to quit her job, which she does, and arranges to rehearse with her the very next morning. However, by the time the next morning comes around and Don is sober, he's beginning to regret his decision, especially once Hannah has turned up and revealed that she can't really dance at all, and that she can't even really remember which is her left foot and which is her right. There follows an extremely funny plot development in which Don tries to turn Hannah Brown into the sort of elegant, refined dancer that Nadine is, and which she is totally unable to become, even though she tries very hard. This includes a fantastically funny sequence where Judy Garland hams it up, pretending to get the steps wrong and using her brilliant comic timing to mess up the choreography in an absolutely hilarious way, all the time while wearing an extravagant ostrich-feathered dress, which is molting feathers all over the place. This was actually put into the film deliberately as an in-joke, because in the iconic Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers film, Top Hat, there's a scene where Ginger Rogers also wears an ostrich feather dress that similarly sheds feathers all over the set, and which kept floating into Fred Astaire's face. The parody of this scene in Easter Parade is a joy to watch, but it soon becomes clear even to Don that Hannah Brown is never going to be another Nadine. Fortunately, however, even though she can't dance, Hannah can sing, and by allowing her to be herself and showcase her natural talent, Hannah and Hughes soon become stars of the stage. But this film isn't just about singing and dancing. Being a golden era Hollywood musical, it is, of course, also about falling in love. And the film has a classic La Ronde scenario at its centre. Hannah Brown quickly falls in love with Don. Don is still in love with Nadine. Nadine is in love with Don's best friend, Johnny. And Johnny falls in love with Hannah Brown. Johnny himself is something of a playboy socialite character, and he's played by Peter Lawford, the English actor who was something of a playboy socialite himself in real life. Nadine is played by Ann Miller, the legendary tap dancer, who exudes elegance and charm from every pore. Originally, the part had been written for Sid Charisse, but, like Gene Kelly, she was unable to fulfill her commitment to the film because of injury. She'd torn some ligaments in her knee, and so Ann Miller stepped in to replace her. Miller was desperate for the role because she'd never danced with Fred Astaire and had always wanted to, but she herself was nursing some very serious injuries indeed. In 1946, she'd suffered horrific injuries when she'd been pushed down the stairs by her drunken and abusive husband. Miller had been pregnant at the time, and the fall caused her miscarriage, but she also broke her back, and when shooting began on Easter Parade in 1947, she was still wearing a back brace. Nevertheless, dancing with Fred Astaire meant so much to her that she gritted her teeth through the pain, wore a metal corset for all of her dance numbers, and carried on regardless. Her dancing in the film is fabulous, and watching her perform in a number like Shaking the Blues Away, which is such an athletic and dazzling dance, it's incredible to think that she created this wonderful number in such adverse circumstances. You'd never know she was wearing a back brace through every scene, and this is partly due to the talents of the costume designer, Irene. Irene's career was at its peak by the time she made Easter Parade, and she'd already designed gowns for some of the most stylish leading ladies in Hollywood, including Ginger Rogers, Carole Lombard, Marlene Dietrich, and Ingrid Bergman. Because the film is set in 1912, she creates a wardrobe that gives a nod to the Edwardian era, but which still contains a lot of details that were fashionable in the late 1940s, such as slim pencil skirts, neat tailored jackets with large shoulders, and fabulously extravagant hats, frequently worn on an angle. The film begins, in fact, with a fashion parade of hats to the accompaniment of the song Happy Easter, and the costumes also take centre stage in a musical number called Girl on a Magazine Cover, in which a succession of models parade in the most gorgeous outfits, whilst pretending to be cover girls for magazine titles such as Harper's Bazaar, Vanity Fair and Vogue. Irene created some amazing outfits for both Ann Miller and Judy Garland to wear in the film. There's a particularly striking mustard yellow suit that she made for Judy Garland to wear that's worn over the top of a black and white checked waistcoat and looks incredibly chic. And another dress worn by Judy after Hannah Brown's triumphant opening night on Broadway is made from gorgeous emerald green velvet, which is draped in beautiful folds and pleats. Meanwhile, Ann Miller's wardrobe is an absolute triumph. One of the recurring jokes in the story's plot is that Nadine always has a different dog to match her outfits, and in one particularly marvellous sequence, she's seen strutting down Fifth Avenue in the Easter Parade, wearing a superb black and white outfit, with two elegant black and white hounds trotting along in front of her. She also looks amazing in a white and red dress, trimmed with ostrich feathers, that she wears for a dance duet with Fred Astaire. This dress, which looks so diaphanous and which has only tiny straps holding it up, is even more of a design triumph when you remember that, underneath it, Ann Miller was wearing a metal corset. However, one detail of the outfit which looks a little bit incongruous is Ann Miller's footwear. When she first appears in the dress, she dances on her own, and she's wearing a pair of fabulous red high-heeled shoes. However, once Nadine has called up Don to dance with her, and Fred Astaire takes the stage, the next shot of Ann Miller's feet shows her wearing very different shoes, rather plain and meagre-looking ballet pumps. This continuity blooper was actually due to the fact that Ann Miller was a couple of inches taller than Fred Astaire, and so when they danced together, she had to change her footwear to minimise the height difference. This is a great big lavish Technicolor musical number in the best MGM style, but it's only one of many big numbers in the film, which is packed full of gorgeous songs and fantastic dance routines. One of my favourites is Steppin Out with My Baby, which features Astaire performing with a large ensemble of brightly dressed dancers, In one section of the dance, the film stock is slowed down. It was actually the first ever slow-motion synchronization section made in a musical, and it shows off Fred Astaire dancing in slow motion while the chorus behind him continue to dance at a normal pace. Whilst this special effect looks rather basic by modern-day standards, it must have looked magical to audiences in 1948. And it's still breathtaking in one sense, because when the film is slowed right down, you get to see every single element of Fred Astaire's dancing, every hand and foot placement, every debonair movement of his body. And actually, when you see it slowed down, it's even more incredible than when you see it at normal pace. Another iconic musical number from the film is A Couple of Swells, which Irving Berlin wrote especially for Easter Parade. It's a comic musical number that satirizes wealthy New York socialites, and it features Fred and Judy dressed as a couple of tramps who are busy walking their way up the avenue. Judy Garland's natural comic ability and clowning talents come to the fore in this number, and she shines brilliantly as the tramp with a baggy suit and blacked-out teeth. In fact, I think it's one of the very few musical numbers I've ever seen Fred Astaire perform where my eye isn't constantly drawn to him. Usually, he's the dancing star, but in A Couple of Swells, it's Judy who takes the lead. Hannah Brown has also learned to take the lead by the time the film comes to its conclusion. I don't want to go into the plot too much because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. But suffice it to say that by the closing reel, Don and Hannah are parading down Fifth Avenue together on Easter Sunday, and it's Hannah who sings Easter Parade to Don rather than the other way round, which for 1948 was a rather unconventional ending. Nevertheless, audiences loved it. Easter Parade was an instant hit, and it became MGM's highest-grossing film of 1948. It also saw the launch of a series of successful further creative collaborations. One of the breakout stars of the film was Jules Munchin, who has a cameo in Easter Parade as the waiter Francois. He has a particularly funny routine where he mimes the making of a special salad, and his comic timing and insouciance led him to go on and star in further Arthur Freed musicals. Freed himself went on to make several more classic MGM Hollywood musicals, including On the Town, which Jules Munchin starred in alongside Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra, as well as An American in Paris, Brigadoon, and, perhaps most famously of all, Singing in the Rain. He made all of these with Gene Kelly, but Fred Astaire also benefited from having made Easter Parade. Having come out of retirement, he decided to stay out, and over the next decade, he went on to star in a string of further musicals, including The Bandwagon, Funny Face, and Royal Wedding. Royal Wedding was in fact originally intended as a film for Fred Astaire and Judy Garland. After the success of Easter Parade, there were several attempts to reunite the pair, but sadly, after filming on Easter Parade had been completed, Judy Garland's health began to suffer again, and although she was cast more or less straight away opposite Fred Astaire in The Barclays of Broadway, she wasn't able to fulfill her commitment, and Ginger Rogers had to step in and take her place. She was also replaced on Royal Wedding by Jane Powell, and sadly, she and Fred Astaire never got to make another movie together ever again. Nevertheless, it's fitting that the one film that they did make together should be such a fabulous musical. The witty dialogue, stylish costumes, wonderful music, and superb dancing make Easter Parade a delight to watch. I never get tired of seeing Ann Miller parade down Fifth Avenue with her ensemble of matching dogs, seeing Judy Garland pull faces as she walks down the same avenue in an attempt to draw the attention of the men who are passing her by, or watch Fred Astaire tap dance his way around a toy shop. This is the perfect matinee film to settle down with on the sofa after a lazy Easter Sunday lunch. and I'll definitely be doing that again this year. That concludes this little talk about Easter Parade, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. I hope also that you can join me again soon for another audio adventure into a different topic. Until then, thank you for your company. Goodbye.